Guys, we're back in Needham today, and behind me is the first completed chimney on this house. So this chimney will be housing a wood burning insert on the inside of this office here. So I wanted to talk about the chimney and just kind of point out a couple things. We're also going to talk about the cedar shingle siding that has been progressing over the last couple of weeks. And I also want to show you a more in-depth look at that liquid applied roof membrane that we're going to be using at the front and rear dormer in the homework loft. So this chimney, this brick actually was sourced through Stone Sourcer on Instagram, Justin. He reclaimed this brick from an old train station, I believe in New Hampshire. We are looking at a full course brick. This is actually the brick right here. So this is a full veneer brick. If you guys remember, this chimney was actually framed out of wood. Doing it this way with an insert was more cost effective than doing a full masonry chimney. And secondly, with that wood burning fireplace, we have a matching unit, the exact same unit in the main living space, but that one's gas. So we have a gas fireplace and a wood burning fireplace, but it's the same one, which can be used in either scenario, just set up correctly. But either way, we wanted this full masonry. We have masonry on the front, the left and right gable end or the gable face of this home. The nice part about using a reclaimed brick is it has a really kind of organic look to it. It's not perfect. Even though the masons did a fantastic job with it, you're not gonna get super straight lines, and that's really the beauty of it. Down here, we have this soldier course, meaning that these are turned vertically. Teak actually designed this to have a 1/2 inch lip, so it kind of gives it that column-based look. Our grade is actually going to come up right about here. So everything below here is really just filler. So you have basically a mulch bed or something like that, but it doesn't go directly to concrete. One of the details I always hate seeing on some of these homes is when you have the brick stop and then you see an exposed foundation. It's really nice when you get that brick all the way down. But you know, a couple things to note about burying brick. Number one, you know, that can cause that brick to fail over time. So typically we only do a course or two, and that's usually where the mulch will sit. Number two, you gotta make sure your weeps are high enough up. On this chimney, we wanted to make sure that we had full drainage behind this brick, between the sheathing and the brick. So we're actually using the Slicker Max by Benjamin Obdyke. And what that is essentially similar to the cedar breather. It has this felt over the top of it. So as we put our brick up, any of that mortar doesn't get trapped in here. This is gonna block that mortar and give us that air gap behind this brick all the way up and out. Now, speaking of up and out, as you look at this chimney, it tapers in. It's really big, just generally speaking, but it tapers in and then it goes up and it has a nice step detail at the very top. And we have our sheet metal partner fabricating a copper cap as well as copper chimney pots to sit on the very top of that will connect to the fireplace. Working our way around, we have our water table. A water table is this 1x stock. And you can actually see this right here. I'll explain what this is in a minute. But then we have our slanted piece of wood here. You're gonna see a detail over there where they actually have a piece of sheet metal that's taped, and that's really to drive any of the rain off the edge of this. This will get painted. These little pieces of white PVC that are on top of it, that's just protecting the edge as they work around there. It's really nice to see all of our trade partners take the time to make sure that they're protecting other people's work. It's important, it helps from a cost perspective, it's just, you know, setting that respect. As we work our way around, before we get to the cedar, the Da Vinci multi-width slate, so that is continuing the install. You can see all of our LED flashing's been set by the mason up there around the chimney, and then they're gonna start working there this way and getting the rest of that Da Vinci installed. So a couple things that we had to do, especially on these swooping roofs, is we had our sheet metal partner actually make the drip edge curved, prepped for us, and for all of the swooping roofs. So they're installing that, they're taping that, and then that Da Vinci multi-width slate shingle comes down across the top of it. And of course we have the GCP Grace Ice and Water Shield across the entire roof. Take a look at the awesome dark gray cedar shingle. I'm gonna actually walk all the way around. I wanna show you some of the details that we're paying attention to when this stuff gets installed. So we're working our way to the back of the garage here. This door is actually due in this week. So when we get this door in, we'll actually cut back the water table. Some of it's actually only tacked on, like this piece here. This will come off. But this is the detail I wanted to talk to you about, is they got this little piece of sheet metal that they bent up, and they're putting it on top of this edge, and then they're taping that to the Slicker Max. Now, the reality is this Slicker Max goes behind the water table and can drain out. So any moisture that makes its way through the siding into this is going to make its way all the way down. Now, you might be asking, Nick, why are you guys using the Slicker Max behind the cedar shingle? Well, I asked the same question, and Mike, Site Super, actually told me that they're using that so they can snap lines on this to set their first course. Super smart, because snapping a line on that's going to be really difficult. So snapping a line on this gives it that more uniform surface, make sure that this water table is dead straight, and then they're going to start going from there up, and then they can start, and then from that point they can snap their lines on top of the shingle to make it go all the way up to the top. Now, a couple other details. All of our trims right now, it's white, it's primed white, but the end result is actually going to be a dark gray color, not exactly the same as the siding. But one thing that we wanted to pay attention to is, as this was being installed, we did not want to have this white edge that was going to be primed exposed, because what would happen over time is that when this shrinks or this moves and that moves, you're going to have that white line that you can see that you can never paint. So before they ran these shingles up, they actually took a brush, they hit all of the side of the trim with its final color. That way, when they come back to paint this trim, they don't have to get all the way in there and run the risk of having this white line show up later on. Now, as that stuff goes up, they're trying to be as careful as they can with coursing. On this home, there's a lot of different elevations, so we're playing with some of the more important ones. And here you can see our shingle coursing doesn't lay out exactly the way we would want with this window, but that just means in other areas, in the other more prominent areas, they do. This is where our condenser units will be, and there'll be some landscaping and less focus on this area. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out is the woven corners, really traditional for us here in New England. All of these corners, as they're being woven, they're taking a brush and making sure that they're painting these edges. Typically, they'll put 2 coats on it. We might go back and do a little touch-up, make sure that this doesn't have any bleed through, because with the tannins in that cedar. But it's nice to do it as you're going up, rather than coming back and doing it later, because it's one of those things that always ends up on someone's punch list when it was intended to be done during the install. You can't really see it from here, but if you look through that yellow netting, there's a white 1x to the right of that window. Now, that's what they're using for their straight edge for all of their shingles. And if you can step back here on this gable end as well, what they're doing is they're using this as their straight edge. Put this up on the side wall. You're going to take a staple gun, you're going to staple through each piece of sheet metal. It's going to be up on the wall. You'll come across, put all your shingles on here, you'll nail them in, and when you're done, you're going to take a hammer and you're going to knock this out, and that staple is going to end up behind one of the shingles that you just installed. Now, the benefit of that is now you're not nailing through this into the face of a finished shingle. The staple stays up behind it, and this is strong enough to hold it in place, but that little staple that's holding it in place is also, or this piece of sheet metal is also thin enough to rip, so this can come out. So that's exactly how they're using this to make sure that as they go up, they're keeping all of the temporary fasteners on their batten behind the finished shingles. I also really like how they use the siga tape on the backside here. This is a little bit like a felt, and rather than having a bunch of nails or screws, what I've had happen in the past before is, because I've actually used this method, my staples or my screws, as I knock this thing out of the course, it would scrape the finished shingle below. So that's a nice little improvement to that method. I've talked about this before, but this is our dining room, and we have a liquid applied roof membrane on it. And then we have this window and then the one on the front. This is our homework loft. And the way Steve has designed these dormers is to be let into the roof. And what I mean by that is, rather than sitting on top of the roof and then having that roof continue, it's actually let in. So when that window comes down, it actually sits into this kind of recessed flat area. One of the more traditional ways to deal with that would be to fabricate a copper pan in that area that would run up the wall, essentially replace what he's doing in liquid. And instead, he's actually installing a liquid applied membrane now. We'll do the Da Vinci roof around it, and then we'll have one final piece of sheet metal detail that will transition from the liquid applied to the slate. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave, and he's going to walk you through the entire process in which this stuff gets installed, and the reasons as to why we opted to go this route instead of copper.
Morning, guys. Dave Maccio here from True North Exteriors out of Cumberland, Rhode Island. Out here today on the Needham project with NS Builders. Just wanted to give you guys a rundown on what we're doing for some tricky waterproofing here on some of these bay windows. If you kind of pan out here, Doug, kind of see this little slope. What we have is we'll have a transition from the shingles to our waterproofing here. That waterproofing will then extend up in, creating that monolithic pan, seamless, fully adhered, 100% bonded to the structure. First, we prep the substrate, make sure it's dry. Okay, we shoot it with a moisture meter and we test to make sure that we're in the parameters for adhesion with Suprema. And then from there, we'll lightly scuff it with an abrasive pad with on a right angle grinder, just to get a little bit of a better mechanical adhesion, get all the dirt and grime off. Wipe that with acetone, and then we're ready to prime. And that's what that white stuff is that you guys see me put on. And that gets coated on right to the substrate, and that's basically the first layer of everything that we build up off of. Some of that light gray paste that you see, it's kind of like the joint compound of the system, where it's used for small holes, small voids, imperfections in the substrate. We mix that with a catalyst, just like we do all the other liquids, and that is a much, much more viscous product, and fills voids, fills gaps, and kind of gives us an even substrate to work from. We can't really stick to air. And then on top of that, we do all of our angle changes and our inside and outside corners. So wherever you see an inside corner or a 90-degree corner or an angle change, that needs double reinforcement with the fleece that you guys have seen me put down. This is a polyester woven fleece. And what we do is we'll put this down in a wet on wet situation where we'll put down a base coat of liquid. Embedded in that, we will put our fleece, and then we saturate over the top of that, locking it in, kind of creating a little sandwich, liquid, fabric, and then liquid on top. And that's what creates our monolithic membrane, if you will. And the final thing is what we'll do is we call the field, or the main body of what we're doing. And on these two specific window aprons, they're very small, so the field area is pretty small. Normally, like on the dining room roof, we're rolling out big 41-inch wide rolls of fleece. On here, we're doing much smaller fleeces. Still is the same. It's the field or the body of the roof. In this specific application, we're gonna let this cure for a couple days. Call in the industry here is primary waterproofing. On top of that membrane that you see there, as to what you can do on top of it. You could do everything from a tile to a sleeper system and an Ipe or a Trex decking. The options are absolutely limitless as to what you can do on top of that. You know, why we're using liquids, right? There were some other options in these two spaces. Liquids, specifically the Suprema All Sand RS liquid system, is inherently free of any seams. So we have absolutely no seams anywhere from down here all the way up into creating our monolithic sill. There's no interruptions in our membrane, as opposed to a sheet good product, rubber, or any kind of asphalt-based product. Every time you take your shears out or your knife out, you're asking for a potential leak. Liquids were the best option, not only to meet the aesthetic requirements, but also the performance benefits of it. The combination of both of those kind of outweighed some of the other choices. Our texture, our color, and our final traffic membrane on roll-on product, no fleece. We'll put that on once this is fully cured a couple days after that. It's going to be pretty similar to the color of the Da Vinci that we're going to be adjacent to, and it should look pretty sharp.
Cool. So guys, a lot going on. We actually have our mechanicals, our plumbing is done, our HVAC is well on its way. It's actually done on the first floor, and our electrical is about halfway complete too. But we'll save that for a future episode. The exterior of this home is looking amazing. We have a great week ahead of us of good weather. So continue to make progress on the roof, the siding, and all things exterior, while the team on the inside keeps moving along. And hopefully before the weather breaks, we get that temporary heat set up.